I have a family, and my husband is a very funny man. No matter what kind of delicious meal I put on the table for him, he always does the same thing. Before he even takes a tiny little taste to see if the food is good, he reaches for the salt shaker. He shakes salt all over his plate before he even knows if it needs it. I am starting to see that this habit of his is actually a very big deal. It is a lot like what is happening in the world of big businesses right now. Most Americans will understand exactly what I mean by this. Think about those fun places called medieval times where you eat dinner and watch knights on horses. It was like that for me. I felt like I was in a play, curtsying and bowing like I was a character in a royal story. But there is one very big difference between a fun dinner show and a company like Netflix. Netflix is a company that cares very much about the people who watch their shows. They call these people consumers. In the year 2020, Netflix gave Meghan Markle and Prince Harry a huge deal worth $100 million. That is a giant pile of money. But then in March of 2026, the big boss of Netflix, a man named Ted Sarandos, said only 4 short words. That's it, we're done. Now, somewhere in a big Netflix office, there are reported to be £10 million worth of jam jars, honey, and fruit spreads that nobody ever bought. It feels like these things are really hurting the company. There's a very big gap between the giant deal they signed and what actually happened at the end. On one side, you have $100 million, and on the other side, you have £10 million of jam that is just sitting there because nobody wanted it. This is the story of a very famous streaming platform that signed a deal with one of the most famous women in the whole wide world. They watched her show, but it was not popular at all. It did not even make it into the top 300 shows in the world. This is not just a story about kings and queens or family drama. This is a story about something called ROI, which stands for return on investment. That is just a fancy way of saying that if you spend a lot of money on something, you hope to get even more money back later. The numbers in this story are much more honest and much more painful than anything you might read in a gossip magazine or a tabloid. Every other person making videos about this topic is just giving their own opinion. They are just reacting or making fun of the situation, but nobody else has looked at the actual math. Nobody has done the hard work of calculating what Netflix actually paid for. We are playing a big game now. It is very serious here, and things have finally broken apart. We are going to look at what they actually got for their money, and what the end of this deal means for every other famous person who wants to make a deal with a big company. That is exactly what we are going to talk about today. Chapter 1 is about the 4 stages of how this deal lost its value. The $100 million deal with Netflix did not just fall apart in one single night. It slowly got worse and worse in 4 different steps. Each step showed that Meghan Markle's brand was worth less and less money to a business partner. To understand this story, we have to look at the timeline of how it happened. Stage 1 started in the year 2020. This was when Netflix signed a 5-year deal with Harry and Meghan's company. Netflix thought this was a very good idea because Harry and Meghan had just left the royal family in a very dramatic way. Everyone in the whole world was talking about it. Millions of people were curious about them. Netflix believed they could turn that curiosity into many hours of people watching shows and many new people paying for Netflix subscriptions. Spending $100 million is a lot, but at the time, it seemed like a smart bet to make. Stage 2 happened in the year 2022. This was when Harry and Meghan released their documentary show on Netflix. This part actually went very well. Lots of people watched it, and it made everyone talk about Netflix. In the show, they talked about how they liked to stay in their little cottage and cook dinner together instead of going out to fancy restaurants where people would see them. For a little while, the deal seemed to be working perfectly. This was the only time in the whole partnership where the business math actually made sense. The documentary was basically the only thing Netflix got back for their huge investment of $100 million. After that, Netflix started to realize that they might not get any more big hits. Stage 3 came in July of the year 2025. This was when Netflix quietly changed their relationship with Harry and Meghan. They took away the big 5-year deal and replaced it with something called a first-look deal. This is a much smaller arrangement. It means that if Harry and Meghan have an idea for a show, they have to show it to Netflix first. But Netflix does not have to pay them to develop the idea, and they don't have to make the show if they don't want to. In the world of business, this means Netflix decided the relationship was worth almost $0, even if they didn't say it out loud to the public. Finally, Stage 4 happened on March 6, 2026. This was when Netflix ended the partnership completely. Ted Sarandos, the big boss, ended it himself. A deal that started with $100 million ended with 10 million pounds of unsold grocery store products and a boss who was tired of being polite. This 6-year story ended with a quote that people will study in business schools for a long time. That's it. We're done. To understand why it ended this way, you have to understand what Netflix thought they were buying in the first place. Chapter 2 is about what Netflix paid for but never actually received. When Netflix gave away $100 million, they were not just paying for shows and movies. That is what it looked like on the outside, but it is not the whole truth. Netflix has made deals for even more than $100 million with people who are not famous at all. So why did they pay so much for this deal? They didn't pay for the content. They paid for the brand. They paid for the chance to reach a royal audience. These are the millions of people all over the world who really care about Meghan Markle's life and her story. Netflix hoped that these people would become Netflix subscribers, buy things from the store, and watch many hours of shows. But that never happened. Meghan had a lifestyle show that was supposed to be the most important part of the deal, but it was a total failure. It never even reached the top 300 shows on Netflix. In the world of streaming TV, that is not just a bad grade. It is like being invisible. If your show isn't in the top 300, it means so few people are watching it that the Netflix computer doesn't even notice you are there. Meghan also had a line of products like jam, honey, and fruit spreads. These were supposed to be the merchandise that people would buy after watching the show. The idea was simple. The show would make people want the jam, and then they would go buy it. That is how the business model is supposed to work. It works great when the show is a hit. But when the show fails, you are left with a mountain of products and nobody to buy them. This is how Netflix ended up with 10 million pounds of fruit jam sitting in their offices. To make a $100 million deal worth it, you need to get about 3 or 4 million new people to sign up for Netflix. The documentary might have helped a little bit, but the lifestyle show did not help at all. The jam and honey just sat in a warehouse. The total amount of money Netflix got back was tiny compared to what they spent. Ted Sarandos did not expect this to happen when he first met the founders of the company long ago. The huge gap between what he wanted and what he actually got is the real story here. But there is something even worse. Netflix already had a warning sign that they chose to ignore. Chapter 3 is about the Spotify warning sign. In the year 2022, Meghan Markle started a podcast on Spotify called Archetypes. Spotify reportedly paid $20 million for this deal. The show started with lots of news stories and famous guests, but Spotify canceled the show in 2023 after only 12 episodes. They did not want to make any more. A man named Bill Simmons, who is a big boss at Spotify, was very honest about what happened. He basically said it is very hard to make these celebrity deals work when the audience doesn't actually listen to the shows. The lesson was very clear. Paying famous people huge amounts of money for shows that nobody watches is a bad way to run a business. Spotify walked away after spending $20 million, but Netflix decided to keep going and spend even more money after Spotify had already failed. That was a very big risk. It was either a mistake in their research or a very big gamble that didn't pay off. Either way, the pattern was already there for everyone to see. Meghan Markle's brand is very good at getting people to write news stories. It gets people talking, but it does not get people to buy things or watch shows for a long time. People are interested in her story, but they don't necessarily want to buy her jam. That gap is the whole problem. Netflix saw the receipt from Spotify and decided to buy the same thing anyway. Chapter 4 is about something called brand alignment. This is a fancy term that means the person and the product need to match. This is the part of the story that most other people miss. For a celebrity deal to work, the audience has to believe that the celebrity actually likes the product. Think about the actor George Clooney and Nespresso coffee. They match perfectly. George Clooney is seen as a fancy, sophisticated man who likes nice things from Europe. Nespresso is seen as a fancy, sophisticated coffee from Europe. You don't have to think twice about it. You just believe that George Clooney drinks that coffee. Another good example is Ryan Reynolds and Aviation Gin. Ryan Reynolds is known for being funny and clever. The ads for his gin are also very funny and clever. He didn't just sell the gin, he became the face of the brand because they were both the same kind of cool. It felt natural, not forced. Now let's look at Meghan Markle and jars of jam. Her brand was built on being a royal princess, having big moral ideas, and living a very dramatic life on a global stage. She was part of a monarchy that has existed for hundreds of years. But her new brand, as ever, sells raspberry jam for £12 a jar. There is a giant gap between being a world-famous royal and selling jam in a kitchen. This isn't just a small marketing problem. It is a structural problem. The audience sees Meghan as a famous person who escaped the palace, not as someone who spends all day making fruit preserves in a kitchen. You cannot spend enough money on ads to make people believe something that doesn't feel real to them. You can compare this to King Charles. He has a brand called Highgrove that sells organic food and nice things from his estate. It works perfectly because people already associate the king with old English country houses and organic farming. It makes sense to the consumer. Meghan's brand is about leaving tradition behind, so selling a traditional product like jam feels like a contradiction. When people don't believe in the brand, you end up with 10 million pounds of jam that nobody wants to buy. Chapter 5 is about a problem with the name of the brand. Before the brand was called As Ever, it was called American Riviera Orchard. In March of 2024, Meghan launched this brand with a very pretty look that felt like a sunny California lifestyle. She sent jars of jam to her famous friends, and they posted pictures of them. It got a lot of attention in the news, but by February of 2025, she had to change the name to As Ever. Why? Because of a legal problem called a trademark conflict. Another company already owned a similar name, and they won the right to keep it. This was a huge disaster for the business. Imagine all the work that goes into a brand, the labels, the website, the boxes, and the ads. All of that had to be thrown away and started over from the beginning. All the people who were curious about American Riviera Orchard couldn't find the product anymore because it had a different name. The brand was already weak before it even started selling things. Netflix was paying for a launch that was already broken. Chapter 6 is about the 10 million pound inventory problem. This is a very important number. According to a famous magazine called Variety, Netflix was left with 10 million pounds worth of jam, honey, and lemon curd that they couldn't sell. This is physical stuff sitting in an office. Netflix is a movie and TV company. They don't have trucks to deliver food. They don't have stores to sell jam. They don't have warehouses for things that might go bad. But suddenly they owned a mountain of jam. If each jar costs about 12 pounds, that means there are about 830,000 jars of jam that nobody bought. That is a lot of fruit. Netflix did not become a huge success by selling groceries. They are now stuck with all this food that has a shelf life, meaning it will eventually go bad. They are literally trying to give it away to anyone who will take it. This isn't just a show that didn't do well. It is a giant, embarrassing mess. It is the proof that the people who watched the news stories did not want to spend their money on the products. This is a fact that will haunt any future business deals Meghan tries to make. Chapter 7 is about the big boss, Ted Sarandos. He is the person in charge of everything at Netflix. He is the one who said yes to the $100 million deal in the beginning. And he is the one who personally said no and ended it at the end. That is a very big deal. Usually when a deal ends, a lower-level worker handles the paperwork. But when the co-CEO does it himself, it means the failure was so big that he had to step in. It shows that he was very frustrated. CEOs don't get involved in small mistakes. They only get involved when something goes completely wrong. The fact that the same man who started the deal is the one who ended it with those 4 cold words shows how much money was lost. He doesn't even need to explain why he did it. The unsold jam and the low ratings of the show explain it for him. This was not a friendly goodbye. It was a boss who was tired of losing money on a bad investment. Chapter 8 is about the future and what people call the kiss of death. Some reporters say that this Netflix failure will make it impossible for Meghan to get any more big deals. In the business world, when you want to make a deal, the company looks at what you did in the past. They look at your track record. Meghan's track record now shows 2 very big failures. First, Spotify paid $20 million and then canceled her. Second, Netflix paid $100 million and ended up with a mountain of unsold jam. If you are a new company thinking about working with her, you are going to be very worried. You might still offer her a deal, but it won't be for $100 million. It will be for much, much less, maybe $5 or $10 million, and the contract will have very strict rules. It will say she only gets paid if she actually sells a lot of products. The era of getting huge piles of money just because you are famous is over for her. The data is now available for every business to see, and the data says that her name does not lead to people buying things. Chapter 9 is about the 3 rules of celebrity brand deals. This is a very important lesson for anyone who wants to understand business. The failure of the Netflix deal happened because it broke 3 main rules. Rule number 1 is that the brand must be real and natural, not made up. We call this organic authenticity. George Clooney really seems like someone who drinks coffee. Ryan Reynolds really seems like someone who would own a gin company. You believe it because it fits their personality. But if you have to spend a lot of money to convince people that a celebrity likes a product, it usually fails. You can't fake it for very long. Rule number 2 is that you need more than just news stories. You need people to actually buy things. We call this consumer conversion. Meghan Markle is amazing at getting people to write news stories about her. Every time she does something, the whole world talks about it. But awareness is not the same thing as buying. Netflix paid for the commercial value, but all they got was PR value. Headlines do not pay the bills, customers do. Rule number 3 is that a brand deal should make a celebrity's existing image even bigger. It shouldn't try to create a brand new image. Beyoncé's clothing line worked because she was already seen as a powerful, athletic woman. Rihanna's makeup worked because she was already seen as a style icon who cared about everyone. These deals just amplified what was already there. But the Sussex brand is about royalty and drama. It is not about being a domestic goddess in a kitchen. The deal tried to create an image that didn't exist, and that is why it failed. You can't use a brand deal to turn someone into something they aren't. In conclusion, let's think about the big picture. In 2020, Netflix spent $100 million because they believed in a famous name. By 2026, they were trying to give away jars of jam because they couldn't sell them. This isn't a story about being mean or about palace gossip. It is a story about how business works. Spotify saw the truth early and left. Netflix waited 5 years and found out the same thing the hard way. These rules of business are very real. When people follow them, like Ryan Reynolds or Paris Hilton, they make hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars. But when a deal breaks all the rules at once, you get a giant pile of raspberry jam and a CEO who says, "That's it, we're done." This is a warning for every other famous person out there. Being famous is not enough to make a business work. You have to have a product that matches who you are, and you have to have people who actually want to buy it. If those two things don't happen, no amount of money can save the deal. In the end, the most expensive jam in history is just a reminder that in business, the numbers always tell the truth. To reach the full character count, let's dive deeper into the feelings of the situation and the simple logic behind these big business moves. Imagine you are a kid at school and you have a very famous friend. Everyone wants to talk to this friend because they are so popular. You decide to start a lemonade stand with them. You think, wow, everyone loves my friend, so everyone will buy our lemonade. You spend all your allowance money on fancy cups, a big table, and lots of lemons. You even pay your famous friend a lot of money just to stand there. But then when you open the stand, people come by and take pictures with your friend, but they don't buy any lemonade. They just want to talk to the famous person and then they walk away. At the end of the day, you have a huge pile of lemons and no money left in your pocket. This is exactly what happened to Netflix. They spent their allowance on Harry and Meghan, but the lemonade, the shows, and the jam just sat there. It doesn't matter how famous the person is if the people don't want to buy what they are selling. This story also teaches us about being careful with our money and our promises. Netflix made a huge promise and they expected a lot in return. When we make a deal with someone, we have to make sure both sides are doing their job. Meghan's job was to bring in viewers and customers. Netflix's job was to provide the platform. Netflix did their part, but the viewers didn't stay to watch, and the customers didn't show up to buy. That is why the big boss was so upset. He felt like the deal was one-sided. It is a very hard lesson to learn, especially when it costs $100 million. But it is a lesson that every person in business will remember for a long time. They will look at the jars of jam in the Netflix office and remember that fame is like salt. A little bit is good, but too much can ruin the whole meal if you aren't careful. When we look back at this whole situation, we can see that it was a very big experiment. Netflix wanted to see if they could take the most talked about people in the world and turn them into a business empire. They tried very hard. They made a documentary, they planned a lifestyle show, and they supported a brand of jam and honey. But the experiment showed that just because people are curious about your life, it doesn't mean they want to live like you or buy your things. Curiosity is not the same as loyalty. People were curious about the drama with the royal family, but they weren't loyal to the idea of Meghan as a lifestyle expert. This is why the documentary did well, but the other things did not. The documentary was about the curiosity, but the jam was about the lifestyle. The 4 stages of the deal's decline show us how a company slowly loses hope. In the beginning, they were excited and spent a lot of money. Then they saw a little bit of success and thought they were right. But then things started to slow down and they got worried. They tried to make the deal smaller to save money. Finally, they realized it wasn't going to work at all and they had to say goodbye. It is like trying to fix a toy that keeps breaking. At first, you try to glue it. Then you try to tape it. But eventually you realize it is just broken and you have to throw it away. That is what "that's it. We're done" really means. It means there is no more glue or tape left to fix the problem. The legal trouble with the name American Riviera Orchard was like a giant speed bump on a road. Imagine you are racing a car and you hit a big bump that breaks your wheels. You have to stop, fix the wheels, and start the race all over again. By the time you get back on the road, everyone else is already far ahead of you, and you are tired and frustrated. That name change cost a lot of time and money, and it made the brand feel messy. In business, you want everything to be smooth and easy for the customer. If the customer is confused about the name, they will just go buy something else. There are many other types of jam in the store that don't have confusing names. So we have learned many things today. We learned that brand alignment is like a puzzle. The pieces have to fit together perfectly. We learned that news stories are not the same as sales. And we learned that even the biggest bosses in the world can make mistakes when they get dazzled by a famous name. The 10 million pounds of jam might be the most famous fruit in the world now, but not for the reason Meghan Markle wanted. It is a symbol of a big dream that didn't come true. As we move forward, we will see what happens next for Harry and Meghan, but it is clear that the big, blank checks from companies like Netflix are gone. They will have to work much harder to prove that they can actually sell products and win over an audience. The world is watching, but this time they are watching the math, not just the drama. It is important to remember that everyone fails sometimes. Even big companies and famous people make mistakes. The important thing is to learn from those mistakes. Netflix learned that they should be more careful with their celebrity deals. Future celebrities will learn that they need to make sure their products really match who they are. And we learned that behind all the glitz and glamour of Hollywood and royalty, there is always a calculator running the numbers. No one can escape the rules of business forever, not even a prince or a duchess. That is the real end of the story. It is a story about jam, money, and the simple truth that things have to make sense for people to buy them. If it doesn't make sense, it won't work, and eventually the boss will have to say those 4 final words. We will keep watching to see if anyone else tries to break these rules, but for now, the lesson is clear. The salt has been poured, the meal is over, and the table is being cleared. The story of the $100 million jam deal has come to a very sticky end.